year was 2031, when the Vrethian Empire made first contact with humanity. Their ships descended through the clouds like silver gods, blocking out the sun over every major city on Earth simultaneously. The Vreth were ancient. Over 60,000 years of unbroken civilization stretched behind them like a river of stars. They had seeded life across 400 worlds, uplifted 11 species to sent, and crushed 23 interstellar wars before humanity had discovered fire. When their translators finally decoded human languages, their first words to Earth's leaders were not a greeting. They were not a warning. They were not even a demand. The Vreth High Commander looked down at the trembling ambassadors of Earth and said, "Simply, you are adorable." Earth's ambassadors blinked. The UN Secretary General, a sharp woman named Adezo Okonkwo, adjusted her glasses and said, "I beg your pardon." The Vreth commander's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, which the xenolinguists would later learn was the equivalent of a fond smile. Your species. Small, soft, remarkably fragile, and yet you persist. You are like the Ferothi poop of the Kilo system. Endearing. That was the moment humanity learned its place in the Vrethian Empire. Not as subjects, not as conquered peoples, not as slaves or soldiers or trade partners, as pets. The Vreth did not think of it as an insult. That was perhaps the most disorienting part. To them, taking a species under imperial protection as a companion species was an honor. The Ferothi they had mentioned were small, 6-limbed creatures from a jungle moon, now pampered aboard Vreth luxury vessels across the galaxy. The Dooley of the Cassian Reach were kept in climate-controlled habitats on Vreth homeworlds, beloved by billions of Vrethi citizens. And now humanity would join their ranks. Earth would be protected, fed, maintained, kept comfortable. Humans would be allowed to keep their cities, their culture, their governance within reason. They would be provided with advanced medicine. Their diseases would be cured, their hunger would end. In exchange, they would submit to Vreth authority, display themselves at imperial exhibitions, and accept their role as the newest and most fascinating pet species in the Empire. Adezo Okonkwo looked at the terms projected onto the screen before her. She looked at her advisors. She looked at the silent crowd of world leaders watching over the secure feed. And then she did something that would confuse Vreth historians for centuries afterward. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a polite one, a deep, rolling, genuine laugh that echoed through the chamber and made the Vreth translator unit stutter trying to interpret it. "All right," she said. When the laughter passed, "All right, we accept." What the Vreth did not know what, no one outside a very small circle of humans knew, was that humanity had been ready for this conversation for 180 years. They just hadn't expected the Vreth to lead with the pet thing. That part was new, but the rest of it, the ships, the galactic routes, the supply chains stretching across 17 star systems. Humanity had been quietly running all of that since 1851. The story of how that happened begins not with a scientist, not with a government, and not with a war. It begins with a merchant sailor named Elias Voss, who was lost at sea during a storm off the coast of Portugal and found something in the water that should not have been there. Elias Voss was not a remarkable man by any external measure. He was 41 years old. He had a scar over his left eyebrow from a bar fight in Lisbon. He owed money to 3 men on 2 continents, but he was curious. Pathologically, almost dangerously curious. And when his small vessel was disabled by the storm and he floated on wreckage for 6 hours watching something massive and metallic sink slowly into the Atlantic, he did not pray. He swam toward it. What? Found lodged in a seashell 40 meters down, was a piece of technology so far beyond anything humans had created that Elias Voss spent 3 days sitting on a rock after he got ashore just staring at the ocean. Then he went back and got more of it. It took him 11 years and the help of 4 other people, all of whom he trusted with his life. By 1862, they had reverse-engineered the basics of the drive system. By 1871, they had built something that could, technically, leave the planet. They called it the Hound. It was ugly. It rattled. It smelled of burning copper and fear. But it worked, and the 5 people who knew about it made a decision that would define the next 2 centuries of human history. They told nobody. Not governments. Not scientists. Not the military. Nobody. Because Elias Voss had read enough history to know exactly what happened when something valuable and powerful was placed in the hands of people who wanted power. Wars happened. Entire civilizations crumbled. So instead they did something audacious. They went into business. Like, subscribe, and share this story if you're enjoying it. We're just getting started and it only gets wilder from here. The early routes were simple, terrifyingly simple in retrospect. Automated cargo. No humans aboard, just the Hound running a pre-plotted course to the asteroid belt and back, carrying ore. They sold the ore through an elaborate chain of shell companies and false mines in Nevada and South Africa. The money funded the next ship. And the next. By 1890, they had 7 vessels. By 1901, they had 19. And they had gone beyond the asteroid belt for the first time. The organization that Elias Voss had built, which had no official name but which its members called the Root, was something entirely new in human history. It was not a government. It was not a corporation, exactly, though it operated like one. It was a guild. A secret guild of interstellar truckers who moved cargo across the solar system and eventually across interstellar space itself. Membership was inherited or granted, never purchased, never forced. The rules were simple and absolute. Rule 1. The route does not exist. Rule 2. The cargo moves. Always. No matter what. Rule 3. We do not start wars. We do not end them. We move things. Rule 4. No government. No army. No empire. No church. No king. We serve their route. These rules held for 180 years through 2 world wars. The nuclear age, the digital revolution, and the slow, grinding chaos of the 21st century. While humanity tore itself apart on the surface of one small planet. A quiet guild of a few thousand people were threading their ships through the dark between stars. By 1951, they had reached for other star systems. What they found there changed everything. The galaxy, it turned out, was full, not of the grand unified civilizations of science fiction, but of something messier and stranger and more familiar. Trade, route, supply chains, middlemen, brokers, warehouses floating in the dark between worlds. The galaxy ran on logistics. The route recognized this immediately, because the route was, at its core, a logistics operation. They did not announce themselves. Deopsov had. They learned 17 alien languages over the next 30 years using methods that would have won Nobel Prizes if anyone on Earth had known about them. They watched how the alien networks operated, where the gaps were, where the demand exceeded supply, when no one was willing to go because the routes were too dangerous or too obscure. And then, very quietly, very carefully, they went there. The route's first alien client was a species called the Morath. The Morath were small, methane-breathing engineers who operated out of a system in the Cygnus Arm and desperately needed biological compounds from Amun 3, systems away that no established carrier would service because the route passed through a debris field that made navigation nightmarish. The route didn't care about the debris field. They had humans flying those ships. Humans who had grown up on vessels that rattled and sparked and required constant improvised repair. Humans who had learned to navigate by dead reckoning through asteroid belts, and who genuinely seemed to enjoy the challenge of a route that should have been impossible. The Morath were baffled. Then they were grateful. Then they were loyal customers for the next 80 years, and referred 17 other species to the route. By 2031, the year the Vreth arrived, the route was operating in over 40 star systems. They had 312 vessels. They employed 6,411 humans across the galaxy. All of them were officially listed in Earth records as having died young or gone off. They had accounts in 11 alien financial systems. They had contracts with 47 species, and they had been the primary logistics provider for 6 Vreth border territories for the past 22 years. The Vreth, for all their ancient wisdom and imperial grandeur, had never thought to look too closely at who was actually moving their cargo on the rim routes. Why would they? The cargo moved. On time, below quoted price. Without complaint, you don't investigate a system that works. So when the Vreth descended on Earth in 2031 and declared humanity their newest companion species, the Roots Leadership Council, meeting in a hollowed-out rock 1.40 from Earth, had exactly one reaction. Well, said the Roots' current director, a woman named Priya Subramaniam, who had been born on a cargo hauler between Jupiter and the Belt and had never actually lived on Earth. This is going to be interesting. Like, subscribe, and share because the galaxy's most awkward employer-employee reveal is coming, and you do not want to miss it. The first 6 months of the Vreth Protectorate of Earth were, by all external measures, peaceful. The Vreth were genuinely, bewilderingly kind. They cured 3 diseases within the first month. Just solved them, handed the treatments to human doctors, and explained the mechanisms with patient thoroughness. They eliminated the food supply crisis in the equatorial regions of Africa and Asia through agricultural technology that would have taken humanity another century to develop. They built climate regulation arrays in the upper atmosphere that began slowly, measurably reversing the damage of 2 centuries of industrial emissions. Humanity, broadly, was stunned. There had been protests, of course. Billions of people deeply uncomfortable with the idea of being designated as pets. But it was very hard to maintain a protest when your aunt's terminal cancer had been cured last Thursday and the food prices had dropped 60%. Adi Sokonkwo now serving as Earth's imperial liaison, which was a polite way of saying humanities. Head of household staff, navigated this with extraordinary skill. She was sharp, politically, but more than that, she was patient. She had read the Roots briefing documents extensively before the Vreth arrived, because Ade Sokonkwo was not merely the UN Secretary-General. She was also, through her late mother, a third-generation member of the Root. She had known this moment was coming, not the pet part. Again. That had been a surprise, but first contact, Some Formavit, had been anticipated and planned for by the Root for decades. Her job, as she understood it, was to keep the Vreth happy and comfortable while the Root figured out what came next. She was very good at her job. The Vreth assigned Earth a warden. His name was Vreth Commander Sutalev, and he was, as far as alien bureaucrats went, reasonable. He was 7 feet tall, had 4 arms, smelled faintly of cedar, and took his responsibilities with the earnestness of someone who had been assigned the care of a very new and very fragile colony of exotic animals. He genuinely liked humans. This was not fake. He found them endlessly surprising. Your species laughs when frightened, he observed to Adezu one afternoon. Most prey species freeze or flee. You laugh. We have never encountered this before. We also cry when happy, Ade said. And we eat food that we know will make us ill because it tastes good. Sutalev stared at her. That is, he said carefully, remarkable. We contain multitudes, she agreed. Meanwhile, deep in the belt, Priya Subramaniam was conducting the most delicate negotiation in the Root's 100-and-a-day-year history. The problem was structural. The Root was now operating inside the territory of the very empire that had just declared their home species to be pets. If the Vreth ever connected the human cargo haulers operating on their rim routes to the humans they had just taken under protection, the consequences were unpredictable. Best case, they renegotiated the contracts with full awareness of what they were dealing with. Worst case, and Priya had run this scenario many times, the Vreth decided that their new pets had been living secret double lives for 22 years inside Vreth territory and reacted the way most powerful empires reacted to discovering they'd been penetrated. Badly. So the question was not whether to tell the Vreth. The question was how, and when, and with what leverage in place beforehand. We need them to need us before they know us, said Cassidy Voss, the Root's chief strategist and a direct descendant of Elias, who had inherited both his ancestors' curiosity and his very practical relationship with debt. We need to be so embedded in their supply chains that pulling us out causes more damage than keeping us. We're already at 47 contracts, sighed Huno Park, the Root's head of operations, a compact woman who had piloted her first ship at age 9. We need more, bigger ones. Critical infrastructure, not rim routes, core routes. They'll look closer if we go for core routes, said another voice. an older man named Graham, who ran their Cygnus arm operations. "Let them look," Priya said. "We've been hiding in plain sight for 22 years. We're not humans to them. We're a carrier. A very good, very reliable carrier that happens to use biological operators. They think our pilots are just the navigation AI's maintenance interface," Juno said. "Good. Let them keep thinking that." The route moved fast over the next 18 months. They pursued and won 7 new Vreth contracts, each one incrementally more central to imperial logistics. A medical supply chain for 3 core worlds, rare element transport from a mining system in the Vreth heartland, communication relay maintenance on 12 deep space stations. Each contract was performed flawlessly, on time, under budget, without incident. The Vreth Logistics Ministry began treating the route, which operated under the name Darkland Carriers in alien markets, as a model provider, a case study in reliability. Meanwhile, on Earth, Sutalev was sending glowing reports back to the Empire about humanity's progress as a companion species. "They are adapting remarkably well," he reported. "Their emotional adaptability is extraordinary. They form bonds with members of other species faster than any companion species we have encountered. Their young have already begun learning High Vreth, which took the Vrethian for generations. They also," he added, in a personal note to his superiors that he did not realize was being read by root intelligence within 3 days, "seem to laugh specifically when they are doing something they know is dangerous. I have not determined if this is a warning behavior or a form of ritual. It may be both. Like, share, and subscribe. We are approaching the moment where centuries of planning either work perfectly or explode magnificently." The revelation came 18 months into the Protectorate. Not because the Vreth discovered it, because the root chose to reveal it. Priya Subramaniam had run the numbers 17 times and consulted with every senior member of the root's council. The window was now. They had embedded deeply enough. The leverage was sufficient. And there was a secondary reason, one that Priya felt in her bones more than she calculated in her spreadsheets. The Vreth were good, not strategically good, not politically good. Actually, genuinely, morally good in the ways that mattered. They had cured human diseases. They had not lied to humanity. They had been honest about what the Protectorate was and what it meant. They treated their other companion species with care and dignity. She had confirmed this through root intelligence across a dozen systems. The Vrethian were not suffering. The Duli were not suffering. The Vreth were not secretly cruel. They were not running a trap. They had seen something small and fragile and surprising, and they had moved to protect it. That was real, and the route had been built by people who valued honesty, who valued the cargo moving without deception between the people who mattered. It was time to be honest. The meeting was requested through Darkline Carrier's official Vrethian Empire contact portal. The request was flagged. Meeting with Imperial Logistics Minister, highest priority. Sensitive operational matter requiring direct discussion. The Imperial Logistics Minister was a Vreth named Ulu, ancient, even by Vreth standards, who had managed the Empire's supply chains for 300 years and had seen every possible vendor situation imaginable. She had not seen this one. The meeting was held on a Vreth orbital platform above a Nutra system. Priya Subramaniam arrived on a root vessel, with 4 council members and Adezeso, who had been brought in at the last minute because she was, as Priya put it, the best first impression humanity had. Ulvratsas arrived with a full logistics ministry staff and what appeared to be, to Priya's experienced eye, absolutely no idea what was coming. They met in a conference room designed for species of various sizes. Priya sat at the table across from a being who was older than the Roman Empire and placed her hands flat on the surface. "Minister," she said, "I need to tell you something about Darkline Carriers." Ulvratsas's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "You are our most valued carrier. Your performance metrics are exceptional." "Thank you. I'm going to explain why they're exceptional." Priya paused. "All of our operators are human." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. Ulvratsas said nothing for a very long time, then sighed very carefully. "Human. As in the companion species. Earth. The new Protectorate." "Yes," Another long silence. You have been operating in Vreth space for 22 years. Yes. With human pilots? Yes. Humans have been over Vreth's post, visibly processing. For 22 years, humans have been operating cargo routes inside the Empire. 47 contracts, 312 vessels, 65 Vrethian installations receiving regular service. The minister looked at Ades. You are the Earth liaison. I am, Ades said. Does your warden know? No. Does the Imperial Council know? No. Does anyone in the Vrethian Empire know this, besides the people in this room? No. Vrethian stood up. She walked to the viewport and looked at the stars for a very long time. When she turned back, her voice was controlled, but there was something else moving underneath it. How long have humans had interstellar travel? Our guild has operated for 180 years, Priya said. We achieved our first interstellar crossing in 1901. The minister closed all four of her eyes simultaneously. You have had interstellar travel for 130 years before we arrived. Yes. And you told no one. We told no one on Earth, either. We are a private organization. You are pets, Vrethian said, and then seemed to hear how that sounded, because she added immediately. I apologize. I mean, the protectorate designation. We know what we've been designated, Ades said, pleasantly. We accepted it. Why? Eddie smiled. Because you cured 3 diseases in the first month and fed several 100 million people, it seemed impolite to immediately complain about the categorization. Like, subscribe, and share, because the minister's reaction is something no one in the Vrethian Empire will ever forget, and neither will you, Vrethian. Set back down. She looked at the performance data that Dark Line Carriers the Route had compiled and presented. She looked at the contracts. The routes, the delivery records going back 22 years. She looked at the humans sitting across from her. Small, soft, bright-eyed. Completely calm. You are not going to demand reclassification, she said slowly. You would have led with that. That is not what this meeting is. Priya shook her head. We are not politicians. We are not diplomats. We move things. Then what do you want? To keep moving things. Officially, with full Vreth recognition of what we are, and a renegotiation of our contracts, to reflect that we are not an automated carrier service but a guild of human pilots. And the protectorate. Ades leaned forward. Our people on Earth have had their lives genuinely improved by the protectorate. We have no interest in undoing that. Your warden is a good man. The medical programs are extraordinary. The climate work is exactly what we needed. But Vrethian said, but we would like the designation to be reconsidered over time. Not today. Not as a demand, as an ongoing conversation between equals. Vrethian was quiet again. Tin sighed. You've been operating in the Orcs debris corridor for 11 years. Yes. No other carrier will go there. We have had 3 vessels lost in that corridor in the past century. It is listed as unnavigable. It's navigable, Priya said. It's just difficult. Our pilots like difficult. Why? The minister asked. Not strategically. Genuinely. Priya thought about it. I think, she said, it's because we're the species that climbed mountains before we had any reason to. We looked at the highest, most dangerous points in our planet, and we thought, I want to go up there. Not because it was useful, because it was there. Vrethian stared at her. We have companion species, she said. We have subject species. We have ally species. We have client species. We have never encountered a species that is simultaneously all of these things. We tend to be difficult to categorize. Ades agreed. What are you? The minister asked. Human, Priya said simply. The meeting lasted 11 hours. When it ended, nothing had been officially decided, but Vrethian, before she left, paused at the door and turned back. The Oreth corridor deliveries, she said. The medical compounds. They are for a Vreth colony of 400,000 citizens who have no other reliable supply line. Every other carrier quoted us, 18 months lead time. We deliver in 6 weeks, Priya said. Yes, said the minister. You do. She paused. My mother is in that colony. She left. The Roots Council sat in silence for a moment after she had gone. Then Cassidy Voss laughed. Then everyone was laughing. The real negotiations began 3 weeks later. They were conducted simultaneously on 3 levels. Oficially. Por oficially. The Imperial Logistics Ministry was reviewing its carrier contracts and had requested direct operational discussions with Darkline Carriers representatives. Unofficially, Ulvreth was having daily conversations with Priya, subramanium that ranged from supply chain optimization to the history of human maritime trade to the question of what humans actually were. And in the deepest background, Adez Okonkwo was having quiet conversations with Sudalev on Earth that she was not recording. The first thing she told him was the truth. All of Italiano. She sat across from her warden in his habitat-adjusted office in Geneva, and she told him about Elias Voss and the wreckage in the Atlantic and the route and the 100, and 80 years and the 47 contracts and Priya and the fleet of 312 ships, and the 6,411 humans living out there among the stars. Sutalev listened without interrupting. When she was finished, he was very still. You have been in space, he said, for 130 years before we arrived. Yes, you could have made contact with us. We weren't ready. We needed to understand the galaxy before we introduced ourselves. You introduced yourselves to the Morath in 1953. We did, and the Vreth in 2009. As a carrier, yes, but not as humans. Not as humans. Sut was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that Adeus would quote for the rest of her life. When the Vrethian were first brought into the Protectorate, he said slowly, they were afraid. They hid. They did not understand what we were or what we wanted. We had to move very slowly to earn their trust. Yes, Ade said. Humans did not hide, Sutalev said. Humans went into business. We tend toward the practical, she said. You went into business, he repeated, as if he was still processing the scale of it. You found alien technology in your ocean, and instead of hiding it or going to war over it or worshipping it, you figured out how it worked and started a freight company. It seemed like the most reasonable response. Sut looked at her for a long moment. I have been filing reports to the Empire describing humans as one of the most endearing and emotionally expressive companion species we have ever encountered. That's flattering. I have told my superiors that humans cry when happy and laugh when afraid and form bonds with other species with almost alarming speed. Also true, I did not mention, he said, that humans have been secretly running interstellar logistics operations for nearly 2 centuries. No, you didn't know that part. I find, he said carefully, that it makes the crying and laughing and bonding make considerably more sense. Like, subscribe, and share. The Vrethian Empire is about to have a very significant staff meeting, and you will want to witness this. The Imperial Council meeting was held 6 weeks after the Geneva conversation. It was a closed session, highest security clearance. Every senior member of Vreth Imperial governance, including the Empress herself, was present. Ulvrith presented. She presented for 4 hours. The roots history, the data, the roots, the contracts, the performance record, the Orith corridor, the medical compounds. Her mother, the Vrethian pup analogy that had been used to describe humans, sat in the room like something embarrassing that nobody wanted to look at directly. The Empress of the Vrethian Empire, who was 800 years old and had governed 200 worlds, and presided over the absorption of 37 species, listened to all of it without expression. When Ulvreth finished, the Empress said, "Show me the performance data for the Oreth corridor." The data was shown. The Empress looked at it for a long time. No losses, she said. No losses in 11 years of operation. Ulvreth confirmed, through the corridor that destroyed 3 of our vessels. Yes. Using human pilots. Yes. The Empress turned to look at the star map projection that showed the route's full operational range across 40 star systems. She was quiet for a very long time. Tense sighed. How did we not know? It was not quite a question. We were not looking, Ulvrethsas said. The cargo moved. We did not examine the mechanism. We examined them as a species, said one of the council members. We assessed their civilization, their technology level, their military capacity. Based on what they showed us, Ulvrethsas said, which was not everything. They hid an entire interstellar operation from us. They hid it from their own governments. We were a secondary consideration. The Empress stood. She walked to the star map. She looked at the routes marked in the route's operational data, including, Ulvrethsas noticed, the route that ran directly past the fourth planet of the Vrethian system, which had been serviced by a human-piloted vessel for 6 years. A human ship had been making regular passes of the Vrethian world, and no one had noticed. The Empress touched the line on the map that marked that route. I want to speak with our director, she said. Priya Subramaniam had been born on a cargo hauler in the asteroid belt and had never been intimidated by large cargo clients, regardless of their size or power. She was, however, extremely aware that she was sitting across from an 800-year-old ruler of a empire who had just learned something that fundamentally broke her mental model of humanity. Priya sat with her hands on the table, in the same posture she had used with every negotiation for 20 years. Jirito Subramaniam, the Empress, said, I want to understand something. I'll answer honestly. You have been operating in my empire for 22 years. You have had 180 years of interstellar capability. You could have approached us at any time. You could have revealed yourselves to your own governments and changed the entire trajectory of your civilization's development. Yes. Why didn't you? Priya thought about Elias Voss, about a man who had found something impossible in the ocean and swum toward it instead of away. About the 5 people who had made a decision to keep a secret, not out of fear, but out of something more practical and more profound than that. Because we watched what happened when species received advanced technology suddenly, she said. The Vreth records are in your archives. The Cassian Reach Uplift, the Morath Dorov Wars, species that weren't ready for what they received. And you decided you weren't ready. We decided we wanted to earn it. Move at our own speed. Understand what we were getting into before we got into it. You decided this as a private freight company. Someone had to. The Empress was quiet. You are the most unusual species we have ever encountered, she said finally. So we've been told. Not because you found alien technology and reverse engineered it. We have encountered that before. Not because you built a covert operation and maintained it for generations. We have seen that too. The Empress paused, because when you did all of this, when you had every reason to seek advantage, to claim territory, to announce yourselves and demand recognition, you started a freight company. You decided the most important thing you could do with interstellar travel was make sure cargo arrived on time. The cargo has to move, Priya said. That's not philosophy. That's just true. Things need to get from where they are to where they need to be. That's what we do. The Empress looked at her for a long moment. The Protectorate designation, she said. For Earth, we understand why it was assigned. It was assigned, the Empress said carefully, because we assessed your surface civilization and found it small and fragile and charming and in need of protection. Yes, we did not assess the 6,000 humans operating quietly across 40 star systems in a fleet of 300 ships who have been providing critical logistics to our border colonies for over 2 decades. No. Had we assessed those humans, the Empress said, we would not have used the word pets. Priya let that sit. What word would you use? She asked. The Empress looked back at the star map, at the routes threaded through debris fields and past border zones and through corridors that no other carrier would attempt. Colleagues, she said. Eventually, given time. Like, subscribe, and share. We are in the endgame now. And the galaxy is about to change. The reclassification took 3 years. Not because the Vreth Empire moved slowly. It was remarkably quick by imperial standards. But because there were 200 worlds and 73 client species and 37 centuries of institutional structure that all had opinions about what humans were and where they fit. During those 3 years, the route kept working. Every contract was honored. Every route was maintained. The Orith corridor deliveries continued on their 6-week cycle. The medical compound shipments reached Vrethian's mother's colony without interruption. On Earth, Sutalev kept filing his reports. They were different now. More honest. He had started including observations that his superiors found confusing. Humans perform optimally under conditions that most species find catastrophically stressful, he wrote. I have observed that the human liaison laughs specifically when she is solving a problem that she believes to be dangerous. I have begun to suspect this is not a stress response, but something closer to joy. They also, he noted, in one report, have a cultural tradition of telling stories about situations where small, underestimated groups succeed against overwhelming odds. They call these stories by many names. I believe the stories are not entertainment. I believe they are the operating manual. The reclassification ceremony was held on a Vreth diplomatic station, with representatives from every imperial species present. Earth sent a Dei Okonkwo, who wore a dress in the colors of the Vrethian Empire alongside the green and blue of Earth's flag. The Root sent Priya Subramaniam, who wore her pilot's jacket, which was old and patched and smelled faintly of burning copper. The Empress presided. The new designation was not a word that translated perfectly. The closest human analog was something between partner and waymaker. It carried connotations of trust, of essential function, of the kind of respect that comes from watching someone do something extremely difficult and extremely well over a very long time. 6,411 humans heard about the reclassification on vessels spread across 40 star systems. They received the news the same way they received most news. They kept working. The cargo had to move. Afterward, at the reception that the Vreth threw with genuine warmth and a catering spread that attempted to include human food with varying degrees of success, Sutalev found Adaze standing at a viewport looking at the stars. Are you happy? He asked. It was the question he always asked. Still, because he found it still surprised him how variable the answer was. Yes, she said. And then, also a little sad, also proud. Also, honestly, a bit tired. All at once. We contain multitudes, she said. Same as she'd said at the very beginning. He had learned, by now, that this was not evasion. It was the most honest answer she knew how to give. The Root, he said. Elias Voss. He found alien wreckage in the ocean in 1851, and he swam toward it. He was curious. He could have drowned. He nearly did. Went back. Sutalev looked at the stars. We have companion species who are gentle and beautiful and easy to love, he said. We have subject species who are powerful and impressive and politically complex. We have client species who are precise and useful and professional. He paused. I do not know what category contains a species that finds alien wreckage in its ocean, reverse engineers it, starts a covert interstellar freight guild, maintains it in secret for 180 years, gets designated as pets by an ancient empire, accepts the designation politely while already being embedded in that empire's logistics for 2 decades, and then reveals itself when it has achieved sufficient leverage not to demand status, but to offer continued service. Adi smiled. Neither do we, most days. What are you? He asked. Same question as the minister had asked. She gave the same answer. Human. He nodded slowly. Yes, he said. I'm beginning to understand what that means. Deep in the belt, on the same rock where the council had met when the Vreth first arrived, Priya Subramania sat with Cassidy Voss, and Juno Park and Graham and the rest of the council. They had a bottle of something that the Marath had given them 11 years ago, which turned out to be extraordinarily potent and tasted, inexplicably, of citrus. They passed it around. Elias Voss, Priya said, which was the toast they always used. Elias Voss, everyone said. They drank. So, said Cassidy. What? Now, Priya looked at the route maps on the table. 200 worlds. 73 species. The Vrethian Empire was the largest political structure in this arm of the galaxy, but it was not the only one. There were 3 other major powers out there, 2 of which they had already made contact with as Darkline carriers. One of which had been watching the Vreth situation very closely for 3 years, and had sent, 6 weeks ago, a very carefully worded message to Darkland carriers inquiring about their availability for a long-term logistics partnership. Priya slid the message across the table. Cassidy read it, laughed, passed it to Juno. Juno read it, laughed harder. Graham read Italiano, set it down, looked at Priya. How soon? They want a proposal in 4 months. We'll need more ships. We'll build more ships. More pilots. We'll train more pilots. Graham nodded. Picked up the bottle, passed it back around. The cargo has to move, he said. The cargo has to move, everyone agreed. And in the dark between the stars, 312 human-piloted ships continued their routes without pausing for any of this. On time, under budget, without complaint. The galaxy didn't stop needing things delivered just because the humans running the deliveries had changed their official status from pets to partners. The routes were the routes. The cargo was the cargo. And humans, as ever, were just quietly, stubbornly, joyfully getting on with it. Like, subscribe, and share this story. And if you want to see what happens when the route meets the second galactic power, let us know in the comments below. Because the galaxy is big. The cargo has to move, and humanity is just getting started. The message from the Caliph Dominion had arrived in clean, precise language that suggested a species uncomfortable with ambiguity. We are aware of your organization's operational history within Vreth space. We are aware of your reclassification. We are aware that you service routes no other carrier attempts. We would like to discuss an arrangement. Priya read it 4 times before she called the council together. The Caliph Dominion was not the Vreth Empire. The Vreth were old and confident and governed with the unhurried patience of a civilization that had never seriously feared extinction. The Caliph were older, and they had feared extinction. 40,000 years ago, the Caliph had fought a war so catastrophic that 3 of their original 7 homeworlds were now dead rocks, drifting in silent orbits. They had survived, rebuilt, grown again, but the memory lived in their institutions, their culture, their architecture, their language. Everything the Caliph built was designed to last. Everything they did was calculated against the possibility of the worst outcome. They did not take risks. They did not work with They had been watching the Vreth human situation for 3 years, with the focused attention of a species that evaluated every new development in the galaxy as a potential threat or a potential resource. They had concluded humanity was neither. They had concluded humanity was something rarer, an honest broker. They want us because we worked inside Vreth space for 22 years, without ever leveraging that position for political advantage, Cassie said, turning the message over in his hands. We moved cargo, Juno said. That's not a moral position. That's a job description. To the Caliph, those might be the same thing, Priya said. Graham leaned back and looked at the ceiling of the rock station, which was raw stone, and had looked exactly this way for 60 years, and would probably look this way for 60 more. What do they actually need moved? He asked. Because Graham always got to it. Priya pulled up the secondary document the Caliph had attached. It was a single route. One route. But when the council saw it, the room went very quiet. The route ran through the shear. The shear was a region of space approximately 40 light years across where gravitational anomalies from 3 intersecting stellar clusters created navigation conditions that were, by every conventional measure, impassable. Ships that entered the shear without sufficient data on current anomaly positions simply did not come back. The Caliph had been mapping the shear for 200 years. They had lost 61 vessels. In the process, they now had maps good enough to calculate safe windows, periods of hours or sometimes days, where a specific corridor through the shear was navigable. The problem was the windows were unpredictable. A ship that entered a window perfectly could find itself facing a gravitational surge on exit that required split-second course corrections beyond the capacity of any automated navigation system. You need a human pilot, Cassidy said. Not a question. What's on the other side? Juno? Husket. Priya looked at the document. 14 Caliph colony worlds. cut off from resupply for 19 years. The shear shifted and sealed the corridor they'd been using. 14 worlds. Graham sighed. Approximately 90 million people, Priya said. The council was quiet. Juno looked at the anomaly maps the Caliph had attached. She pulled them up on the holographic display and rotated them slowly, studying the gravitational patterns with the expression she always wore when she was doing something that her brain recognized as a problem, and her instincts recognized as a puzzle. After several minutes, she said, "I can find the windows." "You've never flown anything close to this," Graham said. "I've flown the Aerith Corridor for 11 years. The shear is not the Aerith Corridor." "No," Juno agreed. "It's more interesting." There it was again, Priya thought. The laugh when the thing is dangerous, the lean in when any reasonable organism would lean back. She had grown up with it, felt it herself, never fully understood it. Sutalev had been right in his report. It wasn't joy exactly. It was something older than joy, something that lived below the level of conscious decision, the thing that had made Elias Voss swim toward the wreckage instead of away from it. "We'll need new ships," Priya said. "The shear will require a different hull configuration. Adaptive shielding, better response systems." "We can build them," Cassidy said. "We have the facilities in the belt. 18 months. Caliph, want a proposal in 4 months," Priya said. "We propose. They accept. We build. Juno flies the survey run. Just me. Juno? Saeed, you and whoever you want in that seat with you. You pick the crew?" Juno nodded, turned back to the anomaly maps. "I'll want 6 months of data before I fly it," she said. "Tell the Caliph to keep their mapping drones active and feed us everything in real time." Done. Priya looked around the table. "Questions? What did the Caliph offer in return?" Graham asked. "Access to their stellar cartography archives, 140,000 years of mapped space." The room went very quiet again. 140,000 years of maps. The route had spent 180 years painstakingly charting routes through a small corner of the galaxy. The Caliph were offering them the accumulated navigational knowledge of a civilization that predated human agriculture. "They know what that's worth to us," Cassidy said. "Yes," Priya said. "That's not payment for a freight route," he said. "That's partnership." "Yes," Priya said again. "Like, subscribe and share, because 90 million lives in the greatest navigational archive in human history are writing on what comes next." The proposal was accepted in 3 weeks. The Caliph were decisive when they had made up their minds. The route began construction on 4 new vessels, specifically designed for sheer navigation, with adaptive hull geometries and response systems built around the assumption that the human pilot would always be faster and more accurate than any automated course correction. Juno Park spent 6 months living inside the Caliph mapping data. She barely slept. She ate at her station. She built models of the shear's gravitational behavior that she tested against the historical data of every lost Caliph vessel, working backward from what the anomaly configuration must have been at the moment. Each ship failed. She found patterns the Caliph cartographers had not found, not because she was smarter than they were, because she was looking for something different. The Caliph had been mapping the shear to understand it. Juno was mapping the shear to fly through it. Different question. Different answers. The windows aren't random, she told Priya 6 months in. There's a deeper cycle. The 3 clusters are interacting on a long period. About 900 days. If I'm right, there are 2 stable corridors that open on a predictable schedule. How predictable? Within about a 6-hour window either side. She paused. Good enough to plan around. How confident are you? Juno looked at the models. Confident enough to fly it, she said, which, from Juno, was as close to certainty as you ever got. The first shear crossing happened on a Tuesday, which Juno chose specifically because she liked that Tuesdays had no particular cosmic significance. No ceremony. No speeches. The vessel was called the Voss, because the council had voted on it unanimously, and Cassidy had cried a little and pretended he hadn't. Juno flew with a crew of 4. All of them volunteers, all of them people who had looked at the anomaly maps and had the particular human response of finding it interesting. The Caliph had 6 observation vessels positioned at the sheer boundary. The Vreth, who had been informed because the route told their partners what they were doing now, had sent a diplomatic observer vessel. Priya watched from the route's operations center in the belt, 14 light minutes away, which meant everything she saw had already happened by the time she saw it. The Voss entered the sheer at 0300 hours station time. The telemetry was extraordinary, not because everything went smoothly, because nothing went smoothly and it didn't matter. The first gravitational surge hit 4 minutes in. Juno's course correction was so fast that the Caliph observation vessel's instruments initially read it as a data error. The second surge hit 80 minutes later and required a full vector change that no automated system would have. Authorized because the math said it was wrong and Juno's instincts said it was right. Her instincts were right. The Voss emerged from the sheer on the colony side 2 hours and 40 minutes after entry. Intact. On course. Crew. Alive. The telemetry reached the observation vessels 6 minutes later. The Caliph Observer Commander sent one message to the Dominion. It said, "They did it." The response from the Caliph High Council arrived 8 minutes after that. It said, "Of course they did." The first supply convoy to the 14 colony worlds departed 3 months later. 8 route vessels, enough to carry significant medical supplies, agricultural equipment, communications infrastructure, and a full data package of everything the colonies had missed in 19 years. Juno led the convoy through the sheer herself. The crossings took 2 hours each. She did it 4 times that month. Twice more the next, establishing the route with the systematic thoroughness that the route had always applied to every corridor it opened. By the end of the first year, the sheer crossing was a scheduled service. 90 million people on 14 worlds received their first reliable supply connection in 19 years. Through a corridor that had been declared impossible. The Caliph High Council sent no official statement about this, but the cartography archives were delivered in full, 2 months ahead of schedule. 140,000 years of mapped space. When Priya opened the first data package and saw the scope of it, she sat alone in her office for a long time. Then she called the council. "We're going to need more pilots," she said. Back on Earth things were changing too. The reclassification had filtered down from imperial policy to lived reality more slowly than anyone expected. But it filtered. The Vreth medical programs continued. The climate work deepened. But the nature of the relationship had shifted in ways that were subtle and then increasingly obvious. Sutalev filed his reports, as always. They were different now. Less the observations of a caretaker watching endearing small creatures, more the notes of someone genuinely trying to understand something that kept surprising him. "Humans," he wrote, in a report that the Empress herself later said she kept a copy of, "do not appear to have a clear category for what they are in relation to the galaxy. Other species we have encountered know their place. The Farathi, our companions. The Moratha, engineers. The Dooli, our artisans. Each species has a center of gravity, a thing they are. Humans are freight operators, and diplomats, and artists, and warriors, and caregivers, and explorers. And they do not appear to experience these as contradictions. I asked the liaison what humans were at the core, if you removed everything else. She said, "Curious. I've been thinking about this for several weeks. I believe she is correct. I believe curiosity is not, for humans, a trait. I believe it is the operating system. Everything else runs on top of it." The Voss crossed the sheer because a human looked at maps of an impassable region and found them. Interesting. Elias Voss swam toward wreckage in the Atlantic Ocean because it was there and he wanted to know what it was. Humans have been running freight routes across the galaxy for 180 years because they found alien technology and their first instinct was to figure out how it worked and then use it to move things. Not to conquer. Not to hide. To move things. I do not fully understand this species. I am not sure any species fully understands itself, but I find I am very glad they are here. Adeas read the report when it was sent, as she read all his reports now, and found she had to sit with it for a moment. She went to find him. He was in the garden of the diplomatic compound, which he maintained in both human and Vreth plant species, because he had decided 6 months into his posting that gardens were one of the best things humans had come up with, and he was going to have one. "I read your report," she said. I know, he said. He was doing something with the soil that he'd learned from watching a human gardener and had decided was meditative. The part about curiosity. Yes. You're right, she said. That's what it is. I thought it might be, he said. It took me a while to see it clearly. When I first arrived, I kept looking for what humans were afraid of. That is usually the best way to understand a species. What they fear defines them. And humans fear a great many things, he said. You are not fearless. I have seen you afraid. I have seen your species afraid collectively, and it is not a comfortable thing to witness. No, she agreed, but you are afraid and curious simultaneously, he said. Most species, when afraid, stop being curious. The fear takes over. You are the only species I have encountered where fear and curiosity seem to run in parallel, where the frightening thing and the interesting thing are the same thing. Adace thought about Juno in the Sheer, about Elias in the Atlantic, about the first time she had ever been told, as a child, that her family had ships among the stars. She had been 7. Her mother had taken her up to the roof of their house in Lagos and pointed at the sky and said, "We have family up there." She had been terrified and could not stop asking questions. "Yes," she said to Sutalev. "That's it. Exactly." He nodded, kept working the soil. "The Caliph have requested a formal partnership meeting," he said, with the Vreth also present. "They want to discuss coordination." "I know," Priya briefed me. 3 major powers at the same table, with the root as a common thread. "The cargo has to move," Adace said. He looked at her. "That phrase," he said, "your people say it as though it is a law of physics. For us it is." He was quiet for a moment. In Vreth philosophy, he said, there is an ancient concept. It does not translate well. The closest human phrase is something like, the thing that continues regardless. "The cargo has to move," Adace said again. "Yes," he said. "I believe that is the translation. Like, subscribe and share. We are at the last stretch now, and the galaxy has one more thing to show us." The 3-power meeting was held on neutral ground, a station that belonged to none of them, in a system that all 3 had agreed to designate as a diplomatic-free zone. It was the first time the Vrethian Empire and the Caliph Dominion had shared a table in 400 years. The last time had not gone well. This time, the common ground was a freight company run by the species. Both of them had initially underestimated. Priya attended as the Roots representative. She wore the pilot's jacket. It was not a fashion choice. The Vreth Empress and the Caliph High Counselor sat across from each other with the careful stillness of very old, very powerful entities who had learned not to let their feelings show on their faces. Priya sat at the end of the table and had the odd sensation of being simultaneously the least powerful person in the room and the reason the room existed. The meeting lasted 2 days. What emerged from it was not a treaty. It was something more functional and therefore more durable than a treaty, a shared logistics framework. Common standards for cargo classification, route maintenance, emergency supply protocols, and mutual access provisions that allowed the route to operate freely across all 3 territories. In exchange, the route committed to specific service guarantees for critical supply chains across both empires. The Vreth colonies on the border that no one else would service, the Caliph worlds that needed the sheer crossings. And whatever came next. "You are a small organization," the Caliph High Counselor observed to Priya near the end of the 2nd day. "We are." Priya agreed. "You have 6,000 people. 6,419 as of this morning. We had 4 births among the crew this week." The counselor's expression, which was hard to read, shifted slightly toward something that might have been amusement. "You count births. We count everything. The route has to be maintained. If we lose a pilot, we need to know. You are planning for generations." "We always have," Priya said. "We're on generation 7. The counselor looked at her for a long moment. 7 generations, she said, of people born into this work, living their entire lives in transit. The first generation was different. They chose it. Every generation after that was born into it, but they choose to stay. Priya paused. No one is held. If someone wants to go to Earth, they go. Some do. Some come back. Some don't. But most stay. Most stay. Why? Priya thought about this seriously, the way she thought about everything. Because out here, she said finally, the work is real. The cargo matters. When Juno crossed the shear, 90 million people got their medicine, that is a fact. You can hold it in your hands. Most species want comfort, the counselor said. Safety. Stability. We want those things too, Priya said. We also want the route through the shear. We contain multitudes. The framework was signed at the end of the second day. It was not celebrated with ceremony. The Vreth and Calith representatives departed. Priya sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes after they had all gone, looking at the star maps still projected on the wall. 140,000 years of map space, and the maps only covered this arm of the galaxy. There was so much more. She thought about Elias Voss on a rock in Portugal, staring at the ocean, about what it had felt like to find something impossible and not turn away. She pulled out her comm unit and sent a single message to the council back in the belt. It said, "We're going to need more ships." The reply from Cassidy came back in 4 minutes. It said, "Already started." She smiled, stood up, picked up her jacket, walked back to the Voss, which was docked at the station's freight berth because that was where route vessels always docked, in the place built for working ships. The stars were outside the viewport, the same stars that Elias had looked up at in 1851 from the deck of his small vessel and probably wondered about before the storm hit and his life changed and humanity's life changed with it. She sat in the pilot's seat. She had always thought best here. Director, her navigator said. Course. Priya looked at the maps. The Calith archives glowed with 140,000 years of routes and corridors and charted regions and unexplored edges where the data simply stopped and the unknown began. She pointed at one of those edges. There, she said. That's uncharted. Yes, she said. The navigator paused for exactly the length of time it took a person to feel the fear and decide to be curious about it instead. Course plotted, he said. The Vasa undocked. The cargo had to move, and humanity, as ever, was just getting started. Like, subscribe, and share. If this story moves something in you, let us know in the comments, because the galaxy is infinite, the routes are endless, and as long as there are humans at the controls, the cargo will always get through.